Folks, listen.
Welcome to another episode of D&M, bringing questions for you that we find interesting. We don't know until the other person says, and bring a mystery to the table for all the generations. Two people from two different backgrounds trying to make sound about the world around us. They both bringing light to the questions they ask. Dina and Michael sliding in your DMs with class. Hey, it's D&M. Hey, it's D&M. D&M. It's D&M. Hey, it's D&M.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sliding with D&M. This is episode 15. I have cultural, and Dina has global, and Dina's going to start us off this week.
Okay. Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I am well, as always. Just trying to live my best life, and keep positive and keep doing the things that I know that are going to be good and improve the world. That's the biggest thing for me. Just as long as I can be a good human, and do my best with the things that I have, I'm on the right track. So I have global this week, and this question has been heavy on my mind. I've actually kind of had a little bit of a spirited debate with my husband about it, which we typically don't have spirited debates. Like, we do. Okay, don't be fooled. Like, we've been married a really long time, almost 22 years, and we have had arguments and spirited debates. But you also have to remember that my husband is Caucasian. He is white. I am Black. I am African American. So there are just some things, as hard as he tries and he does his best, and he is a wonderful, wonderful, good man, he will never, ever, ever be able to relate to some of the things that I have experienced as an African American woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, over the last week and a half, everyone, or a good portion of everyone, or maybe not everyone, but I know that there has been a lot of people watching the George Floyd murder trial. And on top of that, as this trial has been happening and the testimony has been coming out, and people have been, the defense has kind of been trying to refute some of that testimony. In the midst of all of this, there was another, they did say manslaughter, so they have charged the officer, another shooting by a police officer. Dante Moore, who was 20 years old, he was at a routine traffic stop. He was stopped because apparently his registration was expired. He was stopped. When they ran his information, they found that he had a misdemeanor warrant out for his arrest. And then they released the body cam video, and you see them arresting him. And then he tried, and I have watched the video. I've actually watched it several times, kind of in preparation for this question. He slipped away. He consciously made the choice to kind of get out and slip away. And the officer said, "Taser, taser, taser." And then she shot him. And then the car drove off. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I think I just shot him." Mm-hmm. So my question for you is, in relationship to kind of these things that are occurring, how do we, as people, how do we not put the race card on it? Does that make sense? I know.
That's like a loaded.
I know. I'm sorry, but I had to bring the sauce today, people. Mm-hmm. How do we not put the race card on it? And if you want, I can kind of give you my thoughts, and then if you want to give your thoughts, or we can flip the script and you can go first with your thoughts, and then I'll give you mine. So you tell me what you want to do.
I mean, I can attempt to give my opinion on it.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, statistically speaking, so like first and foremost, like, it could have been a complete accident, right? It could have been heat of the moment. The officer was obviously like under a lot of stress in those types of situations, as was Dante Wright. I would assume he was under a lot of stress, probably being arrested and all of that. So it could have been complete a complete accident where she did grab the wrong weapon. On the other hand, though, I mean, I have friends who are police officers, and I have heard a lot of um, outrage from officers themselves
Mm-hmm.
about where you keep your lethal weapon and where you keep your non-lethal weapon. And
Okay.
most oftentimes, what the officers have told me and what I've heard from people online is that if you are right-handed, you keep your taser on your left, your non-dominant hand, and you
Yes.
keep your gun on your right, which is your dominant hand.
I've heard the same
Um,
thing as well.
yes. So could it have been an accident? Yes. But from what I believe, and you know a little bit more about this than I do, the officer, I think, was with the force for like 26 years, right? Like, she's not young.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So in my opinion, like, she's been there for a long time. And by that time, you should know where your gun is and where your taser is, right? Like, these mistakes
Mm-hmm.
should not be happening. Looking again at it, you've seen the video footage. I did not know that there was video footage.
Yes.
I have not watched it, but I do know that when you take a taser out, you have to prime it, meaning that you have to basically turn it on and lights start glowing, and then you have a green dot and a red dot, I believe, or
Mm-hmm.
depending on what brand of taser it is, it may just be a red dot or a green dot, whatever. But there is like a flashlight component of it, and there is a dot of some sort so you can see where you're aiming.
Okay.
The taser is way lighter than the gun than a Glock is.
Mm-hmm.
The taser is also a completely different color. Usually tasers are yellow or orange, some bright color to distinguish from a gun, right?
Yes.
So going back to your original question, how do you not play the race card? I mean, it's it's difficult not to, right? Like, I think that, and that's why this question is so hard, because there is a lot of closeted racism in the US. And there is a lot of closeted racism from both political parties in the policy that they make, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
closeted racism in police manuals, right? And the tactics they use and the people that they find suspicious, right? So
Yes.
I don't know. I really don't know how you would not play the race card. I think it's so it is difficult, and I see both sides of it. I mean, you don't really hear about white people being shot by police officers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, and I'm sure it happens, but I would be surprised to hear if by percentage of population of race that white people are shot more than black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think black people make up about 9% of the population in America, and I would be very, very shocked if by percentage of population, if white people were shot more than black people, adjusted for the population.
Okay.
Um, I just, it's tough. I mean, it really is tough. And I think a lot of it has to do with George Floyd and
Mm-hmm.
the implications that that has had on this is we're basically living through another civil rights movement, right?
Oh, for sure.
That's what this is. I mean, on paper, African American people have rights, the same rights that I do as a white person. But is it like that really in real life, right? No. You can say anything you want about on paper about how you're supposed to treat people or how things should be, but the societal impact of that is completely different. If you told me when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed that black people and white people were automatically equal overnight, I think everybody nowadays would laugh in your face, right?
Oh, for
There was
sure.
still
Yeah.
there was still Jim Crow laws from individual cities. There was still Jim Crow laws from private corporations, right? So instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying whites and blacks are separated or this is white only, right? Now it became, oh, well, this is a private club and this is the fee that you have to pay to enter.
Mm-hmm.
So only
Yeah.
white people would be able to afford it, right? And areas were still segregated. It's just, it wasn't it was no longer allowed to be whites and blacks, right? It was just, oh, this is private. This is a private club. You can't enter. They wouldn't say it's
Yes.
based off of race, but that's what it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, realistically, we're only 60 years out from that, not even, right?
Yeah.
So there's still people alive who marched with Martin Luther King, who were part of the anti-segregation or the anti-segregation movements. There was people who were part of the separate but equal clause. There's still people alive who really wanted people to be segregated, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you think about it, the people who are usually the people who are the heads of these police departments are people who may have been alive back then, you know, by seniority. When you look at the average age for the chief of police or the battalion leader, right? They may be working on the force for 40 years, 30 years, right? They may be 60 years old. They may be old enough to remember the times when things weren't as equal as they are today. And they may have some closeted racism. They may have some differences that they look at people differently. So I think that the answer to your question is, it's hard not to. It's hard not to play the race card. And do I think there's instances where racism isn't necessarily the answer to why something happened? Yes.
Okay.
And this may have been one of those times. It may have been a complete accident, and it may just be, unfortunately, that police officer did kill a black boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, for me, it's really hard to believe that this happens so frequently in America and that it's never about white people that you hear being killed, right? And about the standards. And I think my conversations from you as a black person really speaks to me. And I actually think about this often. I don't know if you remember this, but we once had a conversation about your eldest son driving.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the day, we had this you and I had this conversation because I asked you how you feel about growing up as a young black kid in America, even today. And what you said to me really, for some reason, has stuck with me. And I think mostly because I don't worry about this. And I think that's where the difference is. And you had said that when your son had got his driver's license, you had gone over the expectations of what he's supposed to do if he is pulled over. And one of the last thing that you said was, at the end of the day, you may pass for white because you're mixed, but you're still black at the end of the day. And that is something that stuck with me, because it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to be telling American children and young children from that age that your skin color is really what sets you apart, and you need to act differently because of your skin color. You need to be more respectful because of your skin color. I think that's something that really hit close to home with me for some reason, but I can't relate to it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't relate to that feeling, and I never will. So I don't know. Again, going back to your original question, I think it's really hard not to. So if you want to give your opinion, that was mine.
So I think we need to kind of look at each individual scenario that happens, right? So in the case of Dante Moore, and like I said, I have watched...
Dante Wright.
So Dante Wright. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying Dante Moore. Dante Wright. Okay. And I did watch the video, the body cam video footage. When it starts, he's being arrested. Like, he's up against the car. He has his hands behind his back. Routine, right? For whatever the process is, that when cops pull somebody over and they figure out they have a warrant, it seemed pretty routine. And then you see him make a conscious choice to try to evade police, right? And when he made that choice to evade police, he's now breaking more laws than what he's actually wanted for and to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then he gets in the car and he's attempting to get away. And I agree with you. As a veteran officer, I would hope that you would know the difference between what your weapon feels like and what your non-weapon feels like as a taser,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your gun and your taser.
Mm-hmm.
I would, because you clearly should have more experience than that. I mean, if you've been on the force for 26 years, I would hope so, that you've had enough adequate training provided to you that you can be able to tell the difference. But I think we have to look at, in the case of Dante Wright, he made a conscious bad decision, which then in turn caused officers to make poor decisions, right? It's like a trickle down effect in that case. And really, at the end of the day, we should be upset that something so simple as a traffic stop caused someone to lose their life. And it just so happened that he was Black, right? That's how I look at that scenario. When I look at George Floyd, you know, here was a man, and I don't think anybody really knows, and maybe listeners, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what the circumstances were prior to him finding himself being arrested and down on the ground. But first things first, there's no way that it should take 4 to 5 police officers to subdue one person, who, by the way, was already subdued because he was on the ground, and then you kneeled on his neck for pretty much 9 minutes. To me, that's inexcusable. Like, you have a responsibility and an obligation. You are a community servant. I look at police officers as a community servant. And when I think of community servant, not only are they there to protect and serve and help us from the bad guys, quote unquote, as a community servant, your job is also to inspire and to promote goodness to those that are following the laws and rules, right? And
Yeah.
be the face of how can our community be better. It's not just, I'm here to get bad guys and do this and, make sure that, I really feel like police officers are community servants. You are giving of your life to make the community better overall, whether that be volunteering, humanitarian, whatever, and also protecting us from those things that would disrupt our community. And so when I look at Dante Wright, I don't necessarily look at, at it. It's unfortunate. I don't look at his situation as, oh, the police are just trying to kill another Black man. I look at it from the perspective of, he made a poor decision to try to evade police, which then caused police to make poor decisions. And then unfortunately he lost his life. And yes,
See, but let me
he is
ask you
African
this though.
American. Okay, go ahead.
Let me ask you this, because I think that is a little bit troubling, just because from what I remember, what was the reason he had a warrant out for his arrest originally? Do you remember?
Hold on, let me see.
Okay.
I think the reason was it was like a misdemeanor. From my understanding, hold on, I'm looking it up right now. He was wanted for, was in possession of a gun illegally. Was, I believe, the reason why he had a misdemeanor warrant out for his arrest.
Okay, so from what I read, the reason why he had a warrant out was because he missed his court date. And the reason why he missed his court date was because they sent the court documents to the wrong address. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that is true or not, but to me, it seems like the reason why he had a warrant out for his arrest was the fault of the system. It wasn't his fault. Right.
Well, yeah, which, if that's the case, then you're right. It's completely the fault of the system.
Yeah. So additionally, so that's one thing, right? We'll separate them out. What I find troubling with what you said about how he made a conscious decision to try to run, right? I think everybody has that that feeling of wanting freedom and not wanting to be arrested. And I don't think that he was considered a threat to the public, right? So I don't think that there's any reason for him to be shot, right? I don't think that there's any reason for them not to try to run after him, but to try to shoot him on sight. I think that the US, I think US police as a whole rely too much on weapons and not enough on trying to solve it without violence. You know what I mean? I mean, police officers are trained to run after perpetrators, tackle them, and arrest them. It would have been a completely different story if that officer had tackled him to the ground and arrested him for trying to run, right? Then nobody would have said anything. Nobody in their right mind would have been able to say, oh, she tackled him because he was black. No, she tackled him because he ran away. But when she pulled her gun out and decided to shoot while he's running away, that's a different story. I feel like that's where the line was crossed. And I feel like his belief that he wants freedom and he wants to try to run is completely validated. There's other countries in the world where people who are put in prison, they're not given additional sentencing. Mexico is one of them. They're not given additional sentencing for trying to escape.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my opinion on it. I don't agree with that.
Well, okay, so I have to go back to the video, and maybe I'll send you the video so you can see it. But the officer, wasn't necessarily even involved in the initial. She was kind of, when you see the video, it's another officer that has him up against the car that's attempting to handcuff him. She's kind of standing off to the side, but you see her body cam video, correct? And so when he tries to evade, he like, you know how somebody like grabs your arm and you like juke your arm to get away from them? He juked his arm. He got out of like, as they were trying to put the handcuffs or zip tie or whatever it was. And he got into the driver's seat of the car. And so she was standing back, not even a part of the initial kind of scuffle, because it was the other officer who had him up against the car that was trying to wrestle him back out of the car. And so she's standing back and you hear her say 3 times, taser, taser, taser. And that officer then steps out of the way. The one that was, trying to wrestle him out of the car steps out of the way so he doesn't get hit by the taser. And then that's when you kind of hear like, it's muffled, but it sounds like a gunshot because there's so much chaos and commotion. You hear kind of what sounds like a muffled gunshot. And then you see the car speed off, right? And that's when she says, pardon my language, holy shit, I think I just shot him, right? And then you saw the other officer who had stepped out of the way say, what, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I think I just shot him. Oh my gosh, I did not mean to shoot him. So I still have to go back to the fact that he made a poor decision, and that in turn caused other people. It's like a trickle down effect, decisions have consequences. And
but his initial decision to try to run doesn't mean that officer should have forgot all her training.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. But I also have to think about in his head, you're being arrested. So, and you have to have a hope that our system is fair and just. And we all know that sometimes it is not fair and just, but you have to have a hope that it is fair and just. And so, he made the conscious choice to try to evade, and he tried to get back in his car. And then she made the conscious choice, what she thought was a good decision of, I have my taser in my hand, but I really don't. And so it's all these kind of mix of things that resulted ultimately not in the loss of life. And that's I think my big thing. It's a loss of life, whether it be African American or white. I would still feel the same way. It is a loss of life. However, in the case of George Floyd, it just, to me, I'm like, why would you? He was already subdued. Like, he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't trying to run. He was on the ground, literally on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 4 officers on top of him. Like, why would you, well, 3 that were kind of standing around, 1 kneeling on his neck. You have tons of people that are videoing this and saying, listen, man, like, come on, he's not fighting you. He's not fighting you, and it just, to me, it just bothers me a little bit when we have to look at each scenario and each situation as its own independent. We can't just, I feel like sometimes we get so caught up, and I'm saying this as an African American person, we get so caught up that we just lump it all together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there are times where you can't lump it all together. Like, another instance was someone had posted, I know we need to switch gears quick, but last thing, someone had posted on social media about he's a serviceman, lieutenant colonel, bought a new car, and he got pulled over because his tag, he had how you get the paper tag in the back of your window, and he had that, and it was legal, and he had his dog back there, and he was compliant. And he pulled over to a well-lit area, and which is what I have told my son: if you get pulled over, don't pull over into a well-lit area so you know that you can be seen, right? I've told my son that, who drives, and he had his hands outside. He's asking, like, why am I being stopped? What is the reasoning? And they pepper sprayed him, but for no reason. He's an American serviceman, a lieutenant colonel who's serving our country, and yet that is how you treat him. You already treated him as a criminal, right? And that scenario is completely different. That's uncalled for. That should not happen. He's compliant. He was completely compliant. I feel like in the case of Dante Wright, he wasn't necessarily compliant. And it's unfortunate that it seems to occur more in African American communities. And I'm not saying that the police are always right or always wrong, but we have to figure something out, because we can't keep having this happen, and we can't just automatically be like, it's because he's Black. And I say that, I feel like I can say that because I am Black, so I guess that's just my thought on that. Like, I want it to be more about, as an African American, I hope we get to the day where it's not about, oh, because they're Black. I want it to be us upset because there was a loss of life, which to me is the bigger picture. And maybe it's just me being weird and thinking about the bigger picture down the road. But I think the bigger picture is there was a loss of life, and that is what we should be angry most about. And then the race should be secondary. And I hope we get to the point where that is what it is, that loss of life is the most important thing. And secondary is, were they Asian? Were they Black? Were they Mexican? Were they Latino? Like, that should be a secondary thing. And unfortunately, we as America aren't there yet. Anyway, that was my question. I'm sure we're gonna get some comments and some, like, what? How can she say that? But I guess that's my opinion. That's how, that's how I feel when it comes to certain things like that.
I mean, again, as we've always said, our opinions may be different, and I think this is one of the cases where you and I disagree on some of the stuff, but we agree on other things. Even specifically in this situation, we disagree on some things, but agree on other things that we've said. But I think the point is just to be respectful and to
always, all the time,
attack somebody for their opinion. So I'm going to move on. Thank you for that question. Yeah. That was a tough one for me personally, just because I feel like it is a tricky situation. It just is.
Yeah.
So, are you... I have cultural. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of say my thoughts. So I want to talk about smoking generationally.
Smoking?
Yes, like cigarettes and tobacco. So I've seen a generational trend. My mother grew up smoking, and I think that a lot of you and my mother are the same age, so you're in the same generation. I think that smoking has become a generational thing, and in my generation, it's not as as cool. Like, I don't know anybody that smokes cigarettes.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people in your generation smoked cigarettes. And I think a lot of it has to do with, because it was cool back in the day. And that's just like what everybody did. Right.
Yeah.
So if you want to give your opinion on like, why has smoking changed, and, how has it changed in your generation, and why is it frowned upon in mine, do you think? I think is what I want my question to be.
Okay. So, smoking. So I think growing up, smoking was considered, you think about the old advertisements. You see people in their fancy dresses, fancy outfits, and they're like, they look cool smoking. Like, it was the cool thing to do. And then,
Mm-hmm.
we transitioned to the 80s where, you had the Camel and it was more cartoonish. So it
Mm-hmm.
tried to kind of change and appeal to, the newer generations. And then, the government came out and was like, hey, these things are going to kill you. Like, they're just not good for you. And
Mm-hmm.
they're bad for your health. They're not helping you. And there was a huge push to, get people to stop smoking because it was causing cancer. I mean, that's just a scientific proven fact, and causing these diseases. And so, as we've become more educated and more knowledgeable about cigarettes, then that's why it's so frowned upon. But then the cigarette companies kind of got a little bit smart. And they were like, well, if we can't get these kids to smoke actual cigarettes, we're going to get them to vape, right? And we're going to make it so that it's quote unquote a healthier alternative to cigarettes. But let's be clear. It's not a healthier alternative to cigarettes. At least in my mind, I don't think it is. And correct me if I'm wrong. But I would honestly, if you decided that you wanted to take up smoking, I would be like, please smoke a regular cigarette. Don't vape. And here's why. Because to me, those little pods or whatever they've got going on probably has more chemicals in it than an actual cigarette. By the way, I believe you can get the pods in different flavors. Like, you can get creme brulee or orange creamsicle, right? So right there alone, you're making something to be flavored. And we all know when you like eat flavored things, Cheetos, like, come on, people, we all know Cheetos, like, they're bright orange and they taste really good, but everybody knows that the chemicals and the things in them are probably not the best for you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with these vaping pods. And so they tried to flip the script, I feel, and kind of give, oh, well, let's have a healthier alternative. And now we're seeing people in Generation Z, your generation, have lung problems. Like, some of them have the lungs of a 60-year-old man that has smoked all their life, and they're 21?
Mm-hmm.
I know of someone who vaped all the time to the point that it collapsed his lung. And
Mm-hmm.
he's 22. That's crazy. That's insane. So I honestly think that as we become more educated about things and we learn about things and the harm that it causes, because ultimately at the end of the day, most people want to live a long life. Most people want to live, I feel like when people want to live a long life, I feel like people are like, okay, I've made it to 70, 75. I've lived a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way. I feel like when I hit 75, Lord willing that I do make it to 75, that I have lived a good life and that I will be at peace and ready to go at any time. 70, I would like to be 75, but if it happens at 70, I'm okay with that too. Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've done the things, I've raised my kids, I've hopefully inspired and been a good human, that when I hit 70, I'll be okay to go, but I would prefer to be like 75, 76. Then I'll really be
Mm-hmm.
at peace and be like, okay, I'm ready. Like, whenever it's my time to go, I'm ready to go. So I just think that as we get more education about these things, that smoking will become a thing less and less. And let's also be clear, smoking is not a cheap habit. It's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Gone are the days where you could get a pack of cigarettes back when I was growing up for what, like $1 to $2. No, it's an expensive habit. I remember one of my friends, he I haven't been in contact with him recently, but he smoked, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and he was like, oh, he's like, I don't have any money, and da da da. And so I said to him, I'm like, well, let's calculate how much you're spending on cigarettes. I'm like, how many packs a day are you smoking? He's like, oh, roughly a pack to maybe a pack and a half. He's like, a pack and a half on days that are more stressful. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, so we're talking, and this was a couple years ago, and cigarettes might have gone up. I was like, so that's $8 a day. $8 times 7 is $56 a week. I said, it's like, you know what I mean? I said, I'll say we'll round down and go just a pack a day, because there are
Yeah.
days, that people that, are frequent smokers, that they might smoke a little more because, it's a drug. It eases their nerves. It makes them feel better,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, that's $56 a week. And I said, if you take that, hold on, let me get my calculator out and do the math. I'm not very good at math, people. So if we say 56 times 4, right? We'll say 4 weeks in a month. That's $224 a month. And if we times that by 52 weeks by what? 224 times 12, right? Because there's 12 months
Mm-hmm.
in a year. That's almost $2,700
Mm-hmm.
that you are spending on cigarettes. And that was doing a pack a day. And that was at $8 a pack. And I'm pretty sure, I think the price of cigarettes has gone up since
Yeah,
then.
I mean, I can comment on that because I worked at a grocery store in high school, and I worked behind the service desk, the customer service desk, and I sold cigarettes to people. So I knew some people would walk in once a day, and I knew they were regulars, and I knew that they smoked Marlboro Lights, and I would give them a pack of Marlboro Lights, and it would come out to about like $12, $13 at the time.
$12? Are you
Yeah.
wait, we got to do the math on this. Hold on, partner. So we'll say 12. 12
Yeah.
times 7, right? That's $84 a week times 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's $336 a month times 12. That's over $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's $4
But
grand
then
a year.
you have to keep in mind that some people will come in and they'll buy 2 packs a day, and there's people who smoke more, you know what I mean, than a pack a day. I feel like for people who have been smoking a lot, like a pack a day is the average, I think. But there's some people who smoke 2 packs a day. There's some people who can't afford that addiction, so they buy loose tobacco and they roll cigarettes themselves, right? Because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of want to comment on this too, because I feel like I agree with you. I feel like back in the 60s, right? That was in my mind, like 50s and 60s is like the height of
Mm-hmm.
the smoking era, right? That's when you had like all these cool, like I always think about, what's her name? Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah. It was cool to smoke. Do you ever remember the TV show? I don't know if you probably might not have watched it. And actually, I don't really watch a lot of TV, but I do remember this TV show because it was really popular a couple years ago, Mad Men. And it
Yeah,
was
I
based.
did watch Mad Men for a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what were they doing? They were
Yeah.
cool. So what were they
Hmm.
doing? They were smoking their cigarettes, because that was the cool thing when you went to dinners and stuff. After
Hmm.
dinner, you would have your cognac and cigar, or have
Yeah.
your glass of wine and smoke a cigarette after dinner, because that was the cool thing to do in the 50s and 60s. It made you look, I know this is probably not the right term, but it made you kind of look elegant and professional.
Yeah. And I think that's actually what I was gonna say is there was a certain sense of like elegance to it, right? Like I always think of what's her name from Breakfast at Tiffany's? It's still stuck in my mind.
Oh, Audrey Hepburn.
Yes, Audrey Hepburn in that classic black and white photo where she's holding that like elongated thing that holds your cigarette at the end, right? It's like a
Uh-huh.
tube.
Yeah.
And she's like puffing on it with her gloves and her pearls and her black like slim dress, right? And
And
I
her
always
tiara.
have that picture. Yeah, I always have that picture in my mind where it's like old money, right? Like that's like old school rich, like you're fancy,
Mm-hmm.
you have your martini and your elongated cigarette thing, and you're just hanging out in like a club or somewhere where everybody else is dressed up in dresses and suits and ties as well, right? And you're all having chats over scotch and martinis, right?
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
I think there is like a level of elegance and class to it, right? Like it showed that you could afford cigarettes, so you were of high social status, right? And high monetary status.
Oh,
And
definitely, for sure.
and I think that recently it's become quite the opposite, right? Like you see people who smoke, there's always pictures of like yellow teeth, or you always hear that one commercial where the lady has that hole in her throat and
Yes,
it's
yes.
like the buzzer, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I just think that it's been a complete like societal shift, and a lot of it has to do with marketing, right? Like the cigarette companies, you don't really see ads from them anymore.
Oh, no, you
Like
totally don't
I
see ads from them. It's not like back, when we were growing up on watching TV on the commercials and stuff. Like, you would be watching a cartoon or whatever, and at least once during, not so much probably during like the afternoon hours, but for sure in the primetime hours, you would see at least one cigarette ad. I remember watching TV and see ads all the time. But those were
mhm,
the ads then too, because if you're watching, for lack of a better show, right? Because this was a family show, but we'll say Family Matters, right?
mhm,
We're watching Family Matters or whatever, and the cigarette ad would be kind of like the camel, you know what I mean, which was more cartoonish. So not only
mhm.
it would appeal to kids because it's during that primetime family hour, but also you're getting the cigarette ad in at the same time.
Yeah. And I think that really, I'm trying to like rack my mind and think back to when the last time I saw a cigarette ad was. And I think that I really have only seen like billboards. Like I feel like I've seen like a Marlboro Reds billboard like once in the last few years, right?
But the
And
thing is though too, they've gotten smart. The ads, you have to really look to be like, is that a cigarette ad? Because it doesn't come across
yeah,
as a cigarette ad.
yeah, I guess. I mean, I so moving on to like my generation, I think that when I was in high school, and I graduated what 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high school, like the big thing throughout my high school career was Juul, right? So like people would, and at the time, the U.S. law was that you could be 18 and smoke.
Mm-hmm.
They've since changed it. Now you have to be 21. But at the time when I was in high school, I mean, I remember walking into the bathrooms at school, and there would be people hitting a Juul in the bathrooms. And the most common like flavors that you hear people talk about was like mango and fruit punch or whatever the hell it was, like the
See,
tropical berry stuff. Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about with the vaping and the juuling. And to me, that's worse. In my
Hmm.
head, I'm like, there's so many, because when you have to make something flavored to simulate something that's not a natural flavor, you're
Hmm.
adding chemicals on top of the fact that you're adding a concentrated amount, right? Because a Juul, if correct me if I'm wrong, isn't a Juul like one Juul pod is like smoking one pack of cigarettes?
Yeah, I think it was about that.
The
Yeah.
equivalent or roughly the equivalent.
Hmm.
So what we'll say an older cigarette smoker, somebody from like sorry boomers, the boomer generation that smokes cigarettes, okay?
Hashtag sorry boomers.
All right. From that generation, somebody who, like you said, you have your regulars that would come in every day. Hey, can I have that pack of
Hmm.
Marlboro Lights? In one 5-second hit, you are smoking or taking the amount of nicotine that is in how many cigarettes in a pack? What, like 30? I don't know. I don't smoke,
Um,
so
I'm pretty sure that it's like 24 or something like
24.
that.
Okay, so we'll say 24. We'll say anywhere from 24 to 30. That person is smoking those cigarettes at various points throughout the day, right? It's spread
Hmm.
out over we'll say an 8-hour period, right? Eight to 12
Hmm.
hour period, because you also have to sleep you got to find some time to
There's
sleep.
20 cigarettes in a pack. 20 cigarettes in
20.
a pack.
Okay, so 20 cigarettes in a pack. So they're smoking those 20 cigarettes somewhere throughout the day between an 8 to 12 hour period while they're up before they have to go to bed, right?
Hmm.
You have these kids that are doing that, what somebody does in a day, in a minute. I'll even say a minute to 2 minutes in a little pod that is now, so that's a whole concentrated amount of nicotine. And then you're going to add some chemicals to add some flavors on top of it so they taste good. Like,
Yeah.
this is not the dentist, people, where you get the flavored choice of the bubble gum. So to me, in my head, honestly, I mean, I've never really been a smoker. My kids don't smoke. My husband's never smoked. But if my kids decided one day that they wanted to pick up vaping or smoking, I honestly, and I say this, I honest to God would be like, just please smoke a cigarette. I would rather you do that than to juul or to vape or what. I honestly would. And people have said, that's crazy. Why? And I was like, because at the end of the day, smoking a regular cigarette is a healthier alternative than the juul pods and the vapes. And they're also more addictive because you've heard of these kids that they get so addicted that they're doing anything and everything to get money to scrape by so they can buy these juul pods. And when they go and they get so bad that their parents send them to rehab, and it's like coming off a heroin addict.
I feel like that's so extreme. I'm sorry, but I feel like do you know like kids that have gone to rehab from smoking juul? Because I don't.
I have heard people that like they become so addicted to it and it's so like in their body, and they like start thinking about it all the time. They're doing stuff to like try to steal money so they can buy juul pods because, and sometimes some of these kids, they're not just doing one juul pod a day. And I'm sure, you went to high school, so you probably saw the same kids in the bathroom multiple times a day hitting the juul pod, right?
Yeah, probably. So let me just say this though. You know that Juul from the government, they were forced to take away all their flavored pods, so now they can only make the tobacco flavor and the mint flavor. Like they were actually regulated by the government because there was a crisis in schools and in children who were underage.
Of course, because who doesn't want? That's like when you go to the dentist, and the dentist is like, "Do you want regular toothpaste or do you want cherry bubblegum?" Which kid's not going to say, "I want the cherry bubblegum"? So of course, right? Of course they're going to have, every kid they're not going to want the regular tobacco flavor. They're going to want the mango or the creme brulee or the orange creamsicle because those things taste good. And then they also give you like a high at the same time, an instantaneous high. You and I both know that I also work in education, and I know that it was a serious problem that lots of school districts were having conversations, community forums about it, also having assemblies about it as well with students because it was such a huge issue. And I'm hoping that it has subsided, but I don't know. I'm glad that, the smoking trend has kind of been on the downside, but I think that's because we ourselves have become more educated about the effects of smoking. And I don't think that we've even scratched the tip of the iceberg on the effects of the juul pods and the vaping and all of that. I don't think we know the serious long-term effects because it's such a new thing. It hasn't been around. By the time
I am going to disagree with you, though. I feel like smoking cigarettes themselves is probably worse than vaping, just because.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, tell me why. Tell me why.
They've done, obviously, tobacco. They've analyzed, right? And there's huge amounts of statistics because people have been doing these tests on the long-term effects of smoking since the 60s, right? And since the 50s. So they do find that there is trace chemicals of like tar and all kinds of crap in cigarette tobacco, which is not in vape juice. So the difference, I think, is that there's like 206 different chemicals in a regular cigarette, whereas there may be like under 10 in a regular in vape, because what it is really is it's vegetable glycerin and they mix it with nicotine usually, and then the flavoring if you have flavoring. So there's not as many chemicals, but the difference is that they don't know the effects of the vegetable glycerin on your lungs. So what they have found is that with vaping, so in your lungs, basically the part that takes in the oxygen molecules is called your alveoli or alveoli. And what they find is that people who vape, sometimes your alveoli basically expand and then they don't contract. So basically what it looks like is when you blow up a balloon, a healthy alveoli cell is basically supposed to blow up and then contract back to a very tight form as it originally was. But what it looks like when you vape a lot is it basically opens up and then it looks like a deflated balloon that you blew up to its full size and then back down. So it's like stretched out or like kind of looks like popcorn. It kind of looks like deformed a little bit. So that's the difference. But I would be surprised if in 10 years that they say, oh, cigarettes are actually a healthier version of smoking, just because I know statistically that there's way less chemicals in vaping. I think that they might say that smoking doesn't cause as harmful long-term effects as vaping does. I could see that possibly happening, maybe.
Okay.
But I don't think that they would necessarily recommend one over the other. I think they're just going to say, obviously, don't do either, right?
I think they'll say don't do either. I just know in my head, I've just heard and I've known people that have had discussions with me about, people that, vaped. And I referenced the story again about the person that he vaped all the time. And here he is, 22, with basically a partially collapsed lung. He had to go in the hospital. They had to drain. You know what I mean? You're 22 and you have a partially collapsed lung because of something you were vaping all the time. Just, honestly, just don't do either. You only have one body. You got to take care of it. If you take care of your body takes care of you for the most part. You got to take care of it and you got to nourish it. And so I've never been a smoker, but, I get it. It's also it's an addiction. It's a drug, and your body craves, it's like caffeine, right? You said I know you can't really drink caffeine. You drink one and you're like, nope, shouldn't have done that. Right. Cause your body feels the effects, and, I remember 2 years ago, I decided I was like, I am not going to drink soda. And you know me, I love my cherry vanilla Coke and Snickers. That is my go-to thing. And the first week or two, it was rough. I was like, no, my body was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to us? Girl, you better get that. And it was rough because I didn't realize how addicted I was to it, how addicted what my body craved, what I thought I needed, you know what I mean? And so I think as we become better educated, I think that's the huge part. We've become better educated on the effects of smoking, but look how many years it took us to become better educated on the effects of smoking. We aren't close to that. We know some of the effects of Juul pods and vaping, but we still don't have enough, like you said, studies and education to know that, maybe we should just stop doing this at all, and the fact that, smoking has never been a big thing for me, but if I was a smoker, I'm spending $4,000 a year. $4,000? Oh my gosh, you know what I could do with $4,000? You know how many pairs of shoes I could buy? And I love my shoes. I could buy so many pairs of shoes. So many pairs of shoes. I wouldn't even know what to do with myself if I had $4,000 and could buy all those shoes. So I just think, just educate yourselves, people. Educate yourselves. And I'm not saying go out and smoke cigarettes. But if it were me and my kids, my personal family, if my kids were like, oh, I'm going to start smoking, I think in my head, I would prefer them to smoke a regular cigarette than to vape or to Juul pod. That would be me. I'd be like, well, I don't think you should be doing it, but if you're going to do it, and like I said, the one's an adult, so the other two aren't adults yet, but hopefully I don't ever foresee my middle one doing that because he's so body conscious and health conscious and in tune with how his body works because he's a runner. So, and he needs his lungs. He needs them to work appropriately. So I don't ever foresee him doing that. And the youngest, she's huge into theater, and so she likes to sing, so she needs her lungs to work appropriately as well. So yeah, but that's a good question. Talking
Thank
about
you.
smoking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your mom, did you say your mom smoked, or she grew up around
Yeah,
smokers?
she still does. No, she still does.
Okay.
Yeah.
She still does? How did I not know this?
I don't know. Yeah, she has ever since I was born. I mean, she obviously quit while she was pregnant with me, but she hasn't really. There's been times throughout my childhood where she's tried to give it up or like transition to vaping or whatever, but she's never done it successfully. Yeah, she still smokes cigarettes. She doesn't smoke that much. I think she might smoke like maybe like 3 to 6 cigarettes a day. So like not that much, but yeah, she smokes. Yeah.
I don't know why I knew that. By the way, my dad was a huge smoker.
Yeah.
He was a huge smoker, and my mom pretty much put the kibosh on that. She was like, "Yeah, if we're gonna get married and have kids, you need to quit smoking." So he quit smoking, right? And he hasn't, he hasn't smoked since. But growing, like when my mom met him, he was like a huge smoker, like always smoked, and he was like, "Oh yeah, let's, well, we need to get married." And my mom was like, "Yeah, we're not. You need to stop smoking." Like she's like, "We're not bringing kids to this world, and our house is gonna smell all the time
like cigarettes."
Like cigarettes. She was like, So he quit smoking, but he always had to have gum. I remember he always had to have.
See, it's funny that you say that because chewing gum is actually one of those
like not
things.
nicotine gum. Yeah, like regular chewing gum. I'm not talking about nicotine gum. Like regular chewing gum. He always had chewing gum all the time. Like there was packs everywhere around the house, and in his car too. He always had like 4 or 5 packs of chewing gum. Chewing gum in his car.
Chewing gum is one of those things that people say really does help them quit smoking for some reason, and I don't really understand it. I think it has to do with like the oral fixation of like having something in your mouth, or like just doing something to relieve stress, like subconsciously, while you can do other things. But that's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that a lot of people actually become addicted to chewing gum over smoking.
Yeah. He always had chewing gum, and he always had several packs in his car, and there was always packs of like gum somewhere in different locations around the house. So and I'd be like, "Can I have a piece of gum?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, over there." And I'd be like, "Oh," and I'd go get gum when I was little. So yeah, but my dad used to smoke, but he quit. So
Interesting.
I know. Well, that was two very good questions again, right? For our episodes. And I hope you're enjoying, listeners, our dialogues and the things that we talk about. As always, opinions differ, and that's okay. But we do this so we can talk about the differences and we can talk about the similarities, because at the end of the day, we just want to hopefully make the world a better place, and more importantly, oh my goodness, just be good humans. My name is Dina McKell.
And I'm Michael Petuhoff.
And this is Slidin with D&M.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope to see you next week.